Dim the lights, grab a blanket, and brace yourself for chills.
In the silent mountain forest, a lonely wind blew. The dark blue night sky was dotted with stars, but the bright moon was nowhere to be seen. From a distance came the sound of pines swaying, like the surging waves of the sea. 5-year-old Young Saw sat on the grass, holding a red agate pendant, looking curiously at her elderly grandmother. Grandmother was nearly 70 years old. Her face was full of deep wrinkles, and her small stature resembled that of an underdeveloped girl. Yet her movements remained nimble, and in her bony hand, she held a sharp dagger, deftly slicing at a glowing object. Some white liquid splattered from the object, dotting her disheveled silver jewelry. Yen Saw recognized that dagger. It was a sacred relic of their clan, said to have been passed down from ancient times, capable of slaying gods. As for the glowing object, Young Saw couldn't tell what it was, but around it, the grass within a 5-meter radius had turned a charred yellow. Grandmother pulled out a bloody, fleshy object from the white light, cradling it as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. An excited smile squeezed onto her bark-like face, and that was the first and last time Yang saw her smile. Grandmother approached Yang Saw and said, "Child, come, eat this." Yang Saw looked up, and a full moon had appeared in the sky, so large and so round, illuminating the world as if it were daytime. "Come on, child, eat it, and you will be the moon of our Bawa clan." Arrived at the station, a voice like a lion's roar pierced through Young Saw's eardrums. She jumped up from her seat, rubbed her sleepy eyes, and looked out the window. A grand school gate stood before her, supported by 4 columns intricately carved with ancient totem-like patterns, topped with a large archway inscribed with 4 characters, Ninghua Academy. "Hey, you with the travel bag." The bus ticket seller shouted in a sharp voice, "We've arrived. Didn't you hear? Hurry up and get off. Do you want to grow roots here?" "Oh, okay," Young Saw replied, not angry, shouldering her travel bag, which was almost as tall as her, and got off the bus, faintly hearing the ticket seller snort, "Idiot." Yen Saw smiled awkwardly and looked up at the entrance of Ninghua Academy, her previous discomfort washed away by a surge of excitement. She had finally been accepted into university, and it was such a prestigious one. When applying to schools, Yen Saw had consulted many fellow villagers who had gone out to work. They all told her that the best school in Weiwa City was Ninghua Academy. Founded in 1889, it initially served as a modern school, was converted into a temporary hospital during wartime, and was used as a shelter after the founding of New China. It wasn't until the 1980s that a large conglomerate purchased it, using its substantial financial resources to quickly establish a large educational institution with excellent facilities, comprising elementary, middle, high schools, and a university boasting a 90% employment rate, with outstanding students even getting jobs in the conglomerate. In recent years, Ninghua Academy has almost become a coveted ivory tower for millions of students nationwide, with countless people trying to squeeze in, but success was always reserved for a rare few. Yen Saw was undoubtedly one of them, so she could walk through the grand entrance, even if her clothes were shabby. Eagerly shouldering her huge travel bag, she stepped through the school gate, perhaps too caught up in her excitement, as she slipped and fell hard, her travel bag flying off her shoulder. At that moment, she heard a dull thud and a low cry. Struggling to get up, she witnessed the most dramatic scene. The travel bag had landed squarely on a boy's face, causing blood to gush from his nose and splatter onto his white suit. I'm sorry. Yen-sa hurried over, pulling a handkerchief from her pocket to help stop the bleeding. Are you okay? Don't touch me. The boy waved her away angrily, glaring at the blood on his hands, shaking them off forcefully, and glared at young Sa, saying, "Good. You're doing great." With that, he kicked the travel bag away and walked out of the school gate. Yen-sa got up again, staring blankly at his retreating figure. She felt a strange sensation, as if a worm were crawling slowly across her back, leaving a trail of coldness. Whenever she felt this way, it meant disaster was about to strike. "Congratulations," a girl's voice sounded behind young Sa. She turned around to see a girl in a white long dress, a dress she had seen on television, worn by a French model who walked elegantly down the runway, radiating dazzling brilliance. But now, she felt that compared to this girl, the model looked like an ugly frog. If this were a typical idol drama, you and he would fall in love at first sight and have a passionate romance, the girl said with a mocking smile, her delicate curly hair framing her beautiful face, making her very charming. But wealthy men who don't care about a woman's looks, family background, or upbringing don't exist in real life, so your chances with him are zero. Moreover, you might be in big trouble. With that, she threw Yang Sa a flirtatious glance and walked away, leaving Yang Sa staring at her back. That nauseating feeling surged back. She had a premonition that her university life would be fraught with misfortune. Yang Sa put in a lot of effort and finally found the Welcome Center. It was a broad, tree-lined avenue, dense leaves blocking the sun tightly, with only a few broken rays of light filtering down, gently quivering on people's bodies like the jumbled silver jewelry of Meow girls. Yang Sa cheerfully walked to the welcome desk of the Chinese department. Sitting behind the table was a very beautiful senior sister, her face lightly made up, her almond-shaped eyes resembling a beauty from an ancient painting. "Hello, senior sister," Yang Sa said. "I'm a new student. Is this where I report for the Chinese department?" The senior sister looked up, surprised, and scanned young Sa from head to toe, finally settling her gaze on the travel bag, laughing. "So it's you. Welcome to Ninghua Academy." "Thank you, senior sister." Yen Sa took her admission notice from her travel bag and handed it to her. "Please take care of me in the future." The senior sister opened the notice and looked at the two fine names of Yang Sa, a malicious smile creeping onto her lips. "Young Sa, our department's dormitory is tight, and since you arrived a bit late, you'll have to make do and stay in Qinyuan building. How does that sound?" As soon as she said this, the bustling welcome center fell silent, and countless pairs of eyes turned to stare at young Sa. She sensed that the atmosphere was off and sneaked a glance at those gazes. Some held pity, others mockery, but most were filled with a deep-seated fear, as if they were looking at a humanoid monster. A chill ran down Yang Sa's spine, and goosebumps sprouted all over her body like wild sprouts in the field. A boy standing behind the senior sister whispered, "Bai Lu, isn't this a bit too much?" "That building is." He paused, glancing at young Sa, and added, "Besides, it's been abandoned for many years. We don't even know if it's livable." "You don't need to worry about that." Bai Lu laughed mischievously. A few days ago, the school sent someone to repaint that building. It's definitely livable, although it might be a bit dirty. Just a little cleaning will do. She turned to Yang Sa and said, "How about it?" "No problem, right?" "No problem at all. I often help my grandmother with farm work and cleaning at home, so I'm used to it. What do you think?" Bai Lu turned to the boy and said, "She's agreed." But the boy wanted to say more, but was abruptly interrupted by Bai Lu. "Don't forget, this was his order. You should know what happens if you go against him, right?" The boy stiffened, casting a sympathetic glance at Yang Sa, shaking his head. Bai Lu picked a key from a large bunch and handed it to him, saying, "Take her over." "Me?" The boy shivered, finally realizing the cost of meddling, and reluctantly took the key with a gloomy face. Just as he was about to leave, a cold voice interrupted, "I'm here to check in." Yen Sa turned to see a long-haired girl in a t-shirt and jeans toss her red admission notice onto the table, glaring coldly at Bai Lu. Bai Lu's face immediately turned ugly. She forced a smile and said, "What are you doing here? Weren't you the one who said I would definitely fail to get into this university? Well, here I am." The girl slammed her hand on the wooden table, making it shake, and wood shavings fell like rain from its back. "Now I'm here to tear your mouth apart." "You!" Bai Lu wanted to explode, but noticing the surprised gazes around her, managed to contain herself, sneering, "Fine. Since you're so capable, go ahead and stay in Qinyuan building with this country bumpkin." Country bumpkin? Even with Yang Sa's good temper, she couldn't help but frown, and her impression of this senior sister plummeted. The girl also sneered, snatched the key from the boy's hand, and took Yang Sa's hand to leave. Bai Lu watched their backs and said resentfully, "Let's see how long you can be so arrogant." No one who has lived in that building has ever walked out completely sane. She coldly curled her lips, placing her hands on the table. To her shock, the table suddenly collapsed, splitting in half. Bai Lu's face turned pale. This was made of the hardest green sandalwood, and it shouldn't have. Yen Sa followed the girl, admiring her waterfall-like long hair and the faint floral scent she carried. A sense of goodwill blossomed in her heart, and she ran up to ask, "I'm Yang Sa. What's your name?" The girl slowed her pace, her tense face relaxing into a faint smile. "I'm Liu. Please take care of me in the future." Though it was just a slight smile, Yang Sa felt it was the warmest she had ever seen in her life, raising her goodwill even more. "Did you know Bai Lu before? It seems like you two have some history." "Of course we have history," Liu snorted. She's the head of the entertainment department in the Chinese Department Student Union and has been practicing dance since childhood, quite proud of her skills. Last time there was a dance competition, I beat her. She's been holding a grudge ever since, making things difficult for me everywhere, saying I would never get into this university. If I did, I should come and tear her mouth. She's just a narrow-minded little person. There's no need to bother with her." "I see." Yang Sa frowned and said, "It sounds like that Qinyuan building isn't a good place." "Not just not good." Liu stopped walking and said, "When we get there, you can see for yourself." Yen Sa looked up and saw a 2-story villa-style building with green walls covered in rampant ivy, even blocking the first-floor windows. The door was slightly ajar, the iron gate was old and rusted, and the stone walls had some cracks. In the midst of the surrounding modern high-rises, this building felt like an alien presence, sending chills down her spine. Young Saw shivered and whispered, "Do we really have to live here?" "Yes," Liu nodded helplessly. "Before we go in, I feel obligated to tell you the legends surrounding this building. You might want to consider requesting a room change, but it probably won't do any good." Legends? This building is the oldest structure in Ninghua Academy, with over 100 years of history. During the war, the academy was converted into a hospital, and this place was the morgue. "The morgue!" Yang Sa nearly screamed. "And that's not all." Liyu's expression grew serious, her eyes fixed on the tightly closed windows, something inscrutable in her gaze. After liberation, it became a shelter. Back then, the academy wasn't as large as it is today, and there were many refugees to accommodate, so several farmers seeking food from the countryside were arranged to live here. But not long after, strange occurrences began. For instance, people heard a woman crying at night when they got up to use the bathroom, or saw strange women in white clothing in the hall. These were just minor disturbances, and although they reported them to the government, they were not taken seriously. Little did they know that soon, serious incidents would follow. On a full moon night, a farmer got up to relieve himself and didn't return for a long time. His roommates couldn't sit still and searched everywhere for him, but there was no sign. They initially thought he had run away, but the next morning, his body was found in the bathroom, and that body was horrifying. Young Sa felt a chill run through her body and couldn't help but ask, "What's so terrifying?" The body had no external injuries, but there were no organs left inside. Everything had vanished without a trace. I heard that his expression was absolutely horrifying, and the person who discovered him went mad on the spot. Many officers from the police station came to take the body for an autopsy, and after that, there was no news. The next day, Qinyuan building was sealed off, and it hasn't been opened in all these years. No one will ever know how the murderer completely removed the organs from the body or what he saw that night. With a thud, Young Sa's travel bag fell heavily to the ground. She grabbed Li's arm and stared wide-eyed at a window on the second floor, her face turning pale with fear. Liu, I think I just saw a white figure in that window, and it disappeared in the blink of an eye." "Where?" Li looked in the direction she pointed. "There's nothing there. You must be mistaken." Just then, the iron gate creaked open slowly, revealing a long-haired woman in white. Ghost." Yen Sa screamed, and Liu's expression shifted. She leaped forward, delivering a powerful kick toward the woman in white. They were still some distance from the iron gate, but Liu had reached the doorway in an instant, her kick landing squarely against the adjacent wall, creating a network of cracks in the hard blue stone, like a small spider web. Watching that swift kick, Yen Sa had completely forgotten her fear. She couldn't fathom how Liu had moved so quickly. "Not bad," the woman in white sneered. "Great leg skills, too bad you missed." "So it's you." Young Sa finally realized that the woman in white was the same beautiful girl who had mocked her at the school gate. "Why are you here?" "Of course, for the same reason as you," the girl in white said helplessly. Come on in. We're all in the same boat now. Liu retracted her foot, having intentionally kicked off target. It was a reflex, and she was glad she stopped in time. Otherwise, she would have seriously injured someone. She coldly watched the back of the woman in white, a glint of mystery in her eyes. Liu, what's wrong? Yang Sa tugged at her sleeve. Let's go in. Liu's lips curled into a cold smile as she followed her inside. The interior of Qinyuan building was even worse than outside. The long corridor was so dark that they could barely see the path. The woman in white turned on a dim light, casting a yellow glow over the debris-strewn floor and the filthy walls. Yang Sa almost felt like she had entered a dilapidated building slated for demolition. Could anyone really live in a place like this? Her home was a beautiful gabled house surrounded by picturesque mountains and waters, like a fairyland, a stark contrast to this place. My name is Lu Chu Man. The woman in white introduced herself. This building only has our dormitory occupied, so we chose the innermost room on the second floor. It gets the best light and is close to the bathroom, so we won't have to run far to wash up. You all? We have another roommate. Lu Chu Man stopped and pushed the door open forcefully. Siren, our dorm is complete. The moment the door swung open, Yang Sa saw the most beautiful sight in the world. The figure by the window, illuminated by the sunlight, looked like an ethereal fairy. As she turned, it seemed as if all the light was reflected on her face, her phoenix eyes and willow-like brows, her icy skin and delicate bones. Her charming smile made her look like a stunning beauty straight out of a painting. Hello, you too. Siren smiled at them, her upturned lips bringing a sense of spring to the room. You, hello. Both Yang Sa and Li were momentarily stunned, their speech stumbling. Siren seemed accustomed to this reaction, stepping forward to help them with their luggage. It looks like you two were also sent here. Indeed, Lu Chu Man said while making the beds. Yang Sa is the most unfortunate. She fell the moment she entered the school gate, and her travel bag hit the prince right in the face, causing him to bleed profusely. That was probably the most blood he's ever lost in his life. The prince? His name is Chu Yunfei. Lu Chu Man laughed mockingly. He's the son of the principal, a former student council president, now a sophomore, and he struts around like he owns the place. Anyone who crosses him doesn't have a good time. Yan Sa said angrily, I didn't do it on purpose. Besides, I already apologized. What more does he want? I should go confront him. Absolutely not. Liu pulled out her daily necessities from her suitcase and said, so far, only 3 people have confronted him, and one ended up with a disabled left foot, another with a disabled right foot, and the last one went insane and dropped out. If you want to follow in their footsteps, be my guest. Hearing this, Yang Sa said indignantly, what kind of school is this? Is there no law here? Law? That's a feudal concept, long abolished. Lu Chu Man appeared privileged, but showed no hesitation in doing housework, picking up a broom to start sweeping the debris from the corridor. Want to know how I offended him? It was because I said, you two will fall in love at first sight and experience a passionate romance. I don't know who told him, but he thought it was too damaging to his pride and sent me here. What? Yan Sa finally exploded in anger. He thinks dating me would hurt his pride? All right, enough talk, come help. Lu Chu Man covered her mouth and nose, swinging the broom chaotically at the walls. With all these stones and spider webs, it looks like we'll have to work hard today. Yang Sa turned to look at Siren, who was diligently wiping the computer desk and bookshelf, and asked, Siren, what about you? What brought you here? Me? Siren smiled wryly and said, I don't even know. I just gave my admission notice to Bai Lu, and before I could say anything, she called me here. The night grew deep, and Yang Sa opened her eyes to see a blue mosquito net above her. Faintly, she heard a low song coming from outside the door, like a tune from ancient times, filled with deep sorrow and melancholy. She got out of bed and gently opened the door. The song became clearer, seemingly coming from the nearby washroom. Yang Sa wondered, could it be one of her roommates getting up to use the bathroom at this late hour? But who would sing a song in the middle of the night? Wasn't that just trying to scare her? She pushed open the door to the washroom, and a heavy, musty smell hit her. The washroom was small, divided by a wall into two sections. One was a washing area, and the other was a toilet. Yang Sa saw a white figure standing in front of the sink, holding a white comb and methodically brushing her curly long hair, softly singing a song, though she couldn't make out the lyrics. Chu Man? Yang Sa called softly. Chu Man, is that you? The woman in white didn't respond, continuing to comb her hair. Yang Sa frowned and walked up behind her, tapping her shoulder. Chu Man, why are you combing your hair in the middle of the night? You should go back to sleep. The woman stopped singing and slowly turned her head. Yang Sa's body went cold. Her face was completely dark, with only two eyes as large as copper bells shining with a blue glow. Yang Sa wanted to escape, but her body was frozen like iron, unable to move an inch. The woman emitted a beast-like growl, her veiny hand reaching for Yang Sa's throat. Yang Sa screamed, bolting upright in bed like a corpse revived. It was undoubtedly a thunderclap, waking her three roommates, who jumped up from their beds as the light flicked on with a click. Azza, what's wrong? Did a thief come in? Liu asked, surprised. Ghost. Yang Sa stammered, her face pale with fear. Lu Chu Man approached and lifted the mosquito net, saying, Did you have a nightmare? There's no such thing. Her eyes froze, and the words caught in her throat, unable to come out. Siren and Liu came closer, rubbing their sleepy eyes, asking, What's wrong? Did you see a ghost too? My neck. Lu Chuman's face turned pale. Az's neck. Everyone gasped in shock. On Yang Sa's neck was a huge handprint, the knuckles protruding, looking just like a skeleton. Xu Yunfei sat on the swivel chair in the student council office, holding a beautifully designed car magazine. The office was lavishly decorated, equipped with various appliances, and the walls were covered with wallpaper of Western European style. Behind the desk hung a painting of a dragon in traditional Chinese characters, exuding an aura of dominance. Brother Yunfei. The door was kicked open with a bang, and a sunny boy in a white Nike t-shirt and jeans burst in excitedly. Brother Yunfei, have you heard? Qinyuan building was haunted last night. Xu Yunfei was taken aback, putting down the magazine. What happened? I heard that one of the girls living in Qinyuan building saw a ghost, and there's a handprint on her neck. She's still lying in the dorm, looking pretty scared. Who is it? Xu Yunfei frowned. They say her name is Yang Sa, the country girl who hit you with her travel bag. The boy was animated, but suddenly caught sight of Chu Yunfei's murderous glare and quickly shut his mouth. That incident was the greatest humiliation for Yunfei, the student council president, and it was better not to mention it again. She's probably faking it to get out of there, Chu Yunfei sneered. I've seen many like her. The boy hesitated, cautiously saying, Brother Yunfei, aren't we going a bit overboard? That building really isn't livable. Lei Hao. Chu Yunfei interrupted him. Are you saying my dignity can be trampled on? All right, forget I said anything. Lei Hao shrugged. I'll go write a news article. Once this news comes out, today's school newspaper will definitely be snatched up. This matter doesn't need to be reported, Chu Yunfei said, glancing at him. Promoting superstitions? Do you still want to keep your position as head of the publicity department? Weighing the pros and cons, Lei Hao sighed in resignation. Such a good subject was a shame to waste. Chu Yunfei picked up the magazine again, but his mind was no longer on cars. That building, could there really be something strange about it? Yang saw lay in bed, gently stroking her neck. The handprint had faded, but she could still feel the icy sensation of that skeletal hand lingering on her neck, like countless insects crawling over her body, making her feel sick. She was terrified, truly terrified. Her heart raced at a rate of 120 beats per minute. She wanted to leave immediately, but she also knew that her encounter with a ghost had spread throughout the city. She couldn't bear the thought of being gawked at like a spectacle, so no matter how her roommates urged her, she refused to step out of the dorm. Yang Sa closed her eyes, recalling the mountains and waters of her hometown, the peach blossom-covered Guanyang Mountain, the shimmering Luowei River, the lush green bamboo forest of Sushing, the simple folk of Bawa Village, and her grandmother's sweet rice cakes. The bright songs of Bawa boys, the graceful dances of Bawa girls, and the light boats floating on the Luowei River. Everything felt as distant as a dream. Her heart gradually slowed, her hand instinctively reaching inside her clothing to take out the red agate pendant that hung around her neck. It was the only thing her grandmother had left her, carved into the shape of a peach blossom. Perhaps due to having absorbed the spirit of people over the years, it was crystal clear, and when held, it still felt warm to the touch. Every time she saw this red agate, her mood would calm, more effective than any incantation. Grandmother. Yen Sa pressed the red agate pendant to her chest, murmuring, "Please bless me." As soon as the words left her mouth, a strange sound of water reached her ears. It wasn't the sound of dripping pipes, but rather the murmur of hidden currents in a lake, mixed with the sound of bubbles rising and bursting like a swamp. Young Sa was startled, sitting up. The sound was coming from Lu Chuman's bed, directly across from hers. When she looked at that bed, her face turned pale. The bedding was gone, replaced by a pool of black sludge, bubbling up thickly and emitting a nauseating stench. Yen Sa's mind went blank, instinctively retreating. The swamp rose with a wave of putrid mist, suddenly bursting forth with several white threads that shot out, tightly binding her and pulling her toward the sludge. Yang Sa screamed, her red agate pendant falling from her hand. She struggled desperately, but the strength of the threads was too great, dragging her deeper into the swamp. In a moment of panic, she grasped the bed railing, and in that instant, she saw the most horrifying sight. From the pitch-black swamp, a massive insect head gradually emerged, with enormous eyes, sharp fangs, and a black mouth that spewed out a bizarre stench. Its long esophagus was a void of darkness. No, Yang Sa felt a surge of intense fear rising from deep within her, flooding her body like a torrent. Her hands were too weak to even hold onto the railing. No! Someone help me! Who will save me? No one answered, nor would anyone answer. The head of the insect slowly moved closer to her, its sharp fangs shimmering with a dazzling cold light. No! I don't want to be eaten by a monster. Yang Sa finally cried out. She didn't want to die. She had just fulfilled her wish of getting into college, and she hadn't even had the chance to explore this beautiful, bustling city. She didn't want to die. Just then, she heard a gasp and looked up to see a young man in a white suit standing at the door, staring in disbelief at the insect's head. Chu Yunfei. Yang Sa recognized him as the young man who had been hit in the face by her travel bag. Grasping at straws, she shouted, "Hurry! Come save me! I don't want to die." Chu Yunfei snapped back to reality at her call, grabbing a nearby stool and swinging it violently at the insect. To his surprise, the creature reared its head and bit down on the stool, its fangs grinding it to splinters. Yang Sa and Chu Yunfei were both taken aback. What kind of monster had such strength? Quick, use scissors, Yang Sa urged. Cut these threads. Hurry. Scissors? Chu Yunfei glanced around in a panic, pulled a pair of scissors from under the table, and rushed over. However, with a dull thud, the scissors were crushed, and the white thread remained unscathed between the blades. Chu Yunfei's face turned pale, and he stepped back, accidentally bumping into the travel bag. A hard object inside the bag made a cracking sound, throbbing painfully against his ankle. To Yang Sa's surprise, she shouted, "Chu Yunfei, quickly, get the dagger out of my bag." A dagger? Chu Yunfei turned to look at the travel bag, lifted it without thinking, and tipped it upside down. A chaotic clatter of daily necessities and woven boxes spilled out. Amidst the clutter, he spotted a dagger about 30 centimeters long, its sheath and handle made of aged silver, adorned with various gemstones. The insect was getting closer to Yang Sa, almost able to bite her clothes. Yang Sa anxiously looked at the dazed Chu Yunfei and scolded, "Are you stupid? Pull out the dagger." If it were any other time, if someone spoke to Chu Yunfei like that, he wouldn't let her walk out of Ninghua Academy. But now he didn't have time to think. Instinctively, he drew the blade. A dragon's roar echoed throughout Qinyuan Building as Chu Yunfei looked at the dagger in his hand. The blade gleamed like ice, shimmering with a ghostly blue light, exuding a chill that seemed to freeze the air around them. The insect seemed to sense the approaching danger, letting out a low, beast-like howl as it sank into the swamp. "What are you waiting for?" Yang Sa shouted. "Get to it." A glint of coldness flashed in Chu Yunfei's eyes. His face hardened, and with a powerful flick of his wrist, he hurled the dagger. The dagger, radiating cold, cut through the sunlight and struck the insect squarely on the shoulder. The creature let out a horrific wail, resembling a mix of a lion and a tiger, and quickly sank down, pulling back the threads that bound Yang Sa, vanishing without a trace. The lily-patterned bed sheets returned, and the bed was as it had been before, except in the center lay a sharp dagger. Yang Sa exhaled heavily, her hands relaxing as she collapsed back onto the bed. Xu Yunfei, still in shock, asked, "Are you okay?" Before he could finish, a strange sound pierced the air, and Yang Sa jumped up from the bed, picking up the woven boxes from the floor one by one, checking them carefully. Once she confirmed they were all intact, she sighed in relief and glanced at Xu Yunfei, saying, "Looks like you got lucky." Xu Yunfei was furious. "Is this how you treat your savior?" "Savior." Yang Sa whipped her head around, fuming. "If it weren't for you sending me here, would I be in danger?" "You. By the way, why are you here?" Yang Sa realized something was off. "Are you here to see just how miserable we are?" Xu Yunfei was momentarily stoned. He had come to check on them out of concern that something might happen, not expecting there to actually be a monster in the building. What should he do now? Should he get them to move out? What about his face and dignity? Get out. Yang Sa's face turned pale as she pulled the door shut, speaking in a harsh tone. "You're not welcome here." "What?" "You still dare to stay here," Xu Yunfei said, surprised. "Even if that monster eats me, I won't come begging you. Leave." Yang Sa's tone was resolute. "Fine." Xu Yunfei gritted his teeth. No one had ever dared to speak to him like this since he was born. If he let this girl from the countryside go, how would he face anyone else at Ninghua Academy? You really don't know a good person when you see one. Yan Sa shot him a fierce glare and slammed the door shut. The loud bang sent a cloud of dust tumbling down from the ceiling. It was Xu Yunfei's first time being treated like this, and he felt like punching a hole in the wooden door. However, after a moment's hesitation, he lowered his fist. It wasn't worth it to argue with someone like her. He turned to leave, but felt something underfoot. Picking it up, he found it was a red agate pendant shaped like a peach blossom. He glanced at the loathed wooden door, tightened his grip on the pendant, and a mischievous smile crept across his lips. As soon as Xu Yunfei stepped out of Qin Yuan building, he heard a melodious voice softly say, "Yunfei, what a coincidence." Startled, he looked up to see Bai Lu in a white outfit. She wore a charming smile, walking over to link her arm with his, asking, "Yunfei, what brings you here?" Xu Yunfei frowned, saying, "Are you following me?" "Why would I dare?" Bai Lu laughed. "I just happened to pass by." Xu Yunfei kept a cold expression, saying nothing as he pushed her hand away and walked off. Bai Lu's expression changed, and she turned to look at the ancient building made of bluestone, cold killing intent flashing in her beautiful eyes. Siren's beauty caused quite a stir in the class. Like most beautiful girls, she attracted the admiration of most boys and the jealousy of most girls. Saran herself was accustomed to this and didn't react much. However, as soon as class ended, nearly all the boys gathered around her, wearing flattering smiles and whispering sweet nothings in her ear. Li Yu couldn't stand it any longer. She walked over with a broom from the classroom and stood beside Saran, smiling gently. "You all really have nothing better to do. What does whether I'm busy or not have to do with you?" One rich boy who was planning to ask Saran out glared at her, clearly annoyed that she was interrupting his moment. "You ugly monster. Why don't you just get lost?" Ugly monster? Saran's expression darkened, ready to speak up, but Li Yu smiled even more sweetly. She tapped the broom handle against her palm a few times before bending it forcefully. The entire class gasped. The stainless steel broom handle had bent to a 45-degree angle. With a still gentle smile, she said to the rude boy, "So, what do you think? Is this my business or not?" Of course, of course." The rich boy immediately changed his demeanor, turning away and running out without looking back, disappearing in less than 2 seconds. Li Yu smirked. He ran quite fast. "Thank you." With the boys finally gone, Siran pulled Li Yu's hand, smiling like a child. Li Yu shrugged casually, saying, "It was nothing, just a little effort." As soon as she finished speaking, Liu Chuman walked into the classroom. Noticing her pale complexion, Li Yu asked, "What's wrong? Did you eat something bad?" "No, just encountered a little problem." Liu Chuman sat down in a spot, burying her head in a book, but not turning a page for a long time. Li Yu and Siran exchanged worried glances. What was wrong with Chuman? When the 3 girls returned to their dorm, they found Yang Sa crouched on the floor searching for something. Li Yu looked at her curiously and asked, "Aja, what are you looking for?" "My red agate pendant." Yang Sa didn't look up, crawling under the bed. "Where could it be?" "I thought I dropped it on the floor." "Oh, it's a piece of jade," Siren remarked. "Is it important?" "It was left to me by my grandmother." Lu Chuman noticed that Young Sa's bed was neatly arranged with several woven boxes. Curious, she picked one up. It was palm-sized and round, resembling a powder box, intricately woven with colorful totem-like patterns. What is this?" Yang Sa jumped in surprise, quickly emerging from under the bed, ignoring the cobwebs in her hair, and snatched the box back. "You can't touch this. It's very dangerous." "Dangerous?" Lu Chuman frowned. "Everyone remember this." Yen Sa instinctively patted Lu Chuman's shoulder and said seriously, "You can't mess with this. Otherwise, something terrifying will happen." Lu Chuman's expression changed, pushing Yang Sa's hand away and clutching her shoulder, appearing to be in great pain. "Chuman, what's wrong?" Siren asked with concern. "Did you hurt your shoulder? Let me take a look." "No, it's nothing." Lu Chuman quickly dodged her reaching hand. "I just bumped it while using the restroom. It's nothing." Hearing the word shoulder, Yang Sa's heart sank as she looked at Lu Chuman, who was now sitting back on her bed, packing her things, her expression grave. Could it be? The night was deep, and the dark blue sky was filled with stars. Ninghua Academy had excellent greenery, with sycamore trees and palm-sized leaves clustered together, providing ample shade. A few white figures stealthily approached the outside of Qinyuan Building, moving cautiously under the cover of the trees, their footsteps still making soft rustling sounds. "Boss, this building is haunted," one of them whispered. "Are we really going in?" "Of course," the boy addressed as the boss shot him a glare. "What? Are you scared? You weren't scared when we were collecting the money earlier." "But..." "Shut up. Are you going to do this or not?" The boss donned a terrifying ghost mask. "If we scare them, it's just their misfortune. They brought it on themselves by offending young Master Dai and embarrassing him in front of the whole class." The others stopped talking, putting on their ghost masks and sneaking forward. The terrifying legends surrounding Qinyuan Building made no one willing to serve as its caretaker. The heavy lock on the iron gate had been discarded due to its impracticality, and now the only thing standing in their way was the hidden lock on the wooden door behind it. The boss seemed accustomed to this kind of work. He pulled a piece of iron wire from his bag, inserted it into the lock, and with a twist, the door opened silently, releasing a wave of musty air. Young Sa was lost in thought about what had happened earlier that day, sleeping lightly. The faint sound of the door closing startled her awake. Instinctively, she sat up, pulled back the mosquito net, and noticed that Lu Chumen's bed was empty. She frowned. Could that insect really be connected to Chuman? She glanced at the dormitory door, her heart racing again, thumping like a rapid drumbeat. Gritting her teeth, she pulled the dagger from under her pillow and quietly opened the door, stepping outside. A few boys wearing ghost masks wandered aimlessly in the first-floor corridor, the dim yellow light casting long shadows on the ground. After about a quarter of an hour, they started to feel something was off. The timid boy nervously said, "Boss, we've been walking for so long, but why haven't we seen the stairs?" The boss's face also turned pale, fear creeping in, but he didn't want to lose face in front of his crew. He forced himself to sound calm, saying, "Don't be scared. We're almost there. Boss, I think I heard something. Stop scaring yourself." The boss tightened his grip on the MP4 hanging around his neck, which contained horror sound effects meant to scare Liu and the others. But now he didn't feel scared at all. Instead, he felt an unsettling chill. "Boss, maybe we should go back." A rustling sound echoed around them, like thousands of insects scuttling quickly. The boys could no longer stand it. "We don't want the money. Let's go back." The boss swallowed hard and finally nodded. The others were ecstatic and quickly turned to run, but it didn't take long for their spirits to dampen. No matter how fast they ran, it felt like they were going in circles. On either side were wooden doors that wouldn't budge, and ahead stretched a corridor that seemed to go on forever. "Boss, we can't find the way out," one of them stammered. "Nonsense," the boss snapped, but beads of sweat were already forming on his forehead. "We'll be out soon." The sounds around them grew louder, and the group stopped in their tracks. Suddenly, one of them let out a horrifying scream. They all turned to see countless white threads surging toward them, and at the end of those threads was a massive figure. A scream pierced the cold night sky. Yang Sa jolted awake, gripping the dagger in her hand and quickening her pace. As she dashed down the stairs and stood at the entrance of the first-floor hallway, she witnessed a scene she could hardly accept. Lu Chumen stood in the corridor, dressed in white, appearing like a drifting ghost in the dim light. At her feet lay several boys, all with contorted faces, as if they had seen the most terrifying sight imaginable. They had already lost their breath. When Yang Sa woke up, it was already the next morning. Her roommates were in the washroom getting ready. She rubbed her aching temples, feeling groggy as if a heavy stone had been placed inside her head. "Azza, hurry up. We're going to be late for class," Lee said, entering with her toothbrush and cup while changing clothes and gathering her textbooks. Yang Sa, still feeling muddled, turned slightly and found something hard on her bed. Picking it up, she realized it was an MP4 player. Confused, she looked at the item she could never afford, asking, "Whose is this?" Lee leaned over to take a closer look and handed it back to her, saying, "It doesn't seem to belong to our dorm. None of us have one." "Then that's strange." Yang Sa finished changing and stuffed the MP4 into her jeans pocket, taking her cup, basin, and towel into the washroom, where Siren and Lu Chu Man were busy at the sink. Yang Sa squeezed in and heard Siren say, "Aza, where did you go last night? Why were you gone for so long?" "Last night?" Yang Sa looked at her in confusion. "I slept really deeply. I didn't go anywhere." "How could that be?" Siren asserted firmly. "I heard the door open last night and saw you leave." "What? Did you forget after waking up?" "I didn't go out." Yang Sa frowned, desperately searching her memory but finding no clues. "Last night. I slept too deeply and didn't even dream." "Maybe you were sleepwalking," Lu Chu Man suddenly suggested. "You've been under a lot of stress and experienced some shocks lately. It's easy to sleepwalk. Just get some rest." "Maybe." Yang Sa scratched her head. When did she ever have a habit of sleepwalking? That morning, they had an ancient literature class. The curriculum for the Chinese department was all in traditional characters, and many students complained loudly that they couldn't understand it. Yan Sa didn't have that problem. She had studied classic texts with her grandmother since childhood and was likely more knowledgeable than the teacher in ancient literature. Worried about her roommates, she looked over at the 3 girls sitting beside her. They were focused on the lecture, showing no signs of distress. Yan Sa let out a sigh of relief and pulled out the MP4 player. It was a recently released, colorful model with a black shell, a 1.8-inch screen, and external playback functionality, looking exquisite and compact. Whose could it be? Did it accidentally fall out when Chi Yunfei saved her yesterday? Suddenly, a figure approached her, tapping her desk lightly with a finger. Startled, she quickly stuffed the MP4 back into her desk. Looking up, she found it was her ancient literature teacher. The teacher, named by Hua, appeared to be in his 40s, dressed in a clean white shirt, and had a tidy face that seemed quite pleasant. He looked at Yang Sa with a hint of surprise, staring at her for a moment before regaining his composure. After several seconds, he awkwardly smiled and returned to the podium to continue the lesson. Yang Sa was also surprised. Was there something on her face? Did she have something dirty on her? Perhaps it was just her imagination, but Yang Sa felt that Bai Hua's gaze lingered on her throughout the morning. Finally, lunch hour arrived. As soon as the bell rang, the students rushed out of the classroom. As usual, Yang Sa went to eat with her roommates. Ninghua Academy was different from regular public universities. Many students came from affluent families. Besides the large cafeterias, several Western-style restaurants had been built in scenic spots, exquisite and elegant, resembling a paradise hidden from the world. Yan Sa came from a rural background, and her relatives had all passed away. Although the various ornaments left by her grandmother were precious and represented a significant fortune, she didn't want to touch a single penny. Life had become quite tight, and the Western restaurants were far beyond her means. Even in the cafeteria, she could only eat some coarse food. Fortunately, Ninghua Academy was known for its good meals, so she didn't feel too deprived. After lunch, Yan Sa set off alone to find Chu Yunfei to ask about the MP4. Ninghua Academy was vast, and with so many buildings, it felt like a maze. After great effort and asking countless classmates, she finally found the student council office building by a pond. as expected of Ninghua Academy. Yang Sa admired the luxurious 3-story building before her, exclaiming that even the student council had an office building. "Who are you looking for?" A boy's voice came from behind her. Yang Sa turned around to see a tall boy in sportswear holding a basketball, sweat glistening on his forehead. "I'm looking for Chu Yunfei. Is he here?" "You're looking for Brother Yunfei?" The boy sized her up. "Who are you?" "My name is Yang Sa." "So you're Yang Sa." The boy exclaimed in surprise. "I was just about to look for you. I didn't expect you to come by yourself." "I'm Lei Hao, the head of the publicity department." "Come on, I'll take you to see Brother Yunfei." "Wait." Before Yang Sa could grasp the situation, Lei Hao grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the building. "Brother Yunfei, look who I brought." Lei Hao barged in, but both of them froze in shock. Chu Yunfei was sitting on a swiveled chair, and Bai Lu was sitting on his lap, cuddled up to him in an extremely intimate manner. Yang Sa's face turned red, and she quickly turned away. Lei Hao awkwardly chuckled, saying, "Brother Yunfei, it's broad daylight. Isn't this a bit inappropriate?" Chu Yunfei's face remained cold. When he saw someone enter, he gently pushed Bai Lu away from his lap. Bai Lu, who had been enjoying the warmth of his broad chest, was taken aback as her moment was interrupted. Her face turned pale with anger as she grabbed her bag from the table and walked out without looking back, giving Yang Sa a cold glare as she passed, her eyes icy. Yang Sa couldn't help but shiver and took a step back. "What did you bring her here for?" Chu Yunfei said coldly. "Do you think anyone can just walk into the president's office?" "I came to return this." Yang Sa, feeling no goodwill toward him, pulled out the MP4 and tossed it to him. "If I find it again, I'll throw it into the lake." "What is this?" Chu Yunfei frowned. "I don't need this cheap stuff." "Cheap stuff?" Yang Sa was taken aback, a surge of anger rising within her. How could he call this cheap? This was something she wouldn't even dare to dream of owning. "This belongs to Zhang Lei." Lei Hao suddenly chimed in, picking up the MP4. "I've seen him use this. Look, there's a crack here. He must have dropped it while fighting with some thugs outside. It seems like they really went to Qinyuan Building last night." "What?" "They went to Qinyuan Building." Yang Sa was shocked. "What? You didn't know?" Yang Sa tried to recall what happened last night, but her mind was foggy, as if shrouded in mist. "I didn't know. What happened exactly?" Chu Yunfei asked in a low voice. "Brother Yunfei, today I got reliable news that a few guys from Zhang Lei's dorm took money from that brat Dai Hang to dress up as ghosts and scare the 4 girls in Qinyuan Building. But they haven't come back since last night. I was wondering if something happened to them." "Scare them as ghosts?" Chu Yunfei said angrily. "Why?" "I heard that the girl named Liu publicly humiliated Dai Hang. Dai Hang is getting more and more arrogant." Chu Yunfei cast a cold glance at Yang Sa and asked, "What did you see last night?" "I didn't see anything," Yang Sa replied. "I slept really soundly." Chu Yunfei picked up the MP4 and said, "If that's the case, why is this with you?" Yang Sa frowned, straining to recall her experiences from last night, but it was all a blank. I don't know." Chu Yunfei stopped pressing, opened the MP4, and the recording interface popped up. Something clicked in his mind. Could it be? He gently pressed the button to start playing the recording. At first, there was a rustling sound, followed by a man's voice. "Boss, we can't find the way out." The three of them were startled and quickly strained to listen. "Nonsense. We'll be out soon." That's Zhang Lei's voice, Lei Hao said. Next, there were chaotic footsteps, and the group sounded frantic, mixed with rustling noises like countless insects scurrying. A heart-wrenching scream pierced the air, causing Yang Sa and Lei Hao to jump. Then, they heard the dull thud of the MP4 hitting the ground as the recording ended. The student council office fell silent, a silence that felt eerie. None of them spoke, and Yang Sa's eyes reflected clear surprise and fear. Finally, it was Lei Hao who broke the tense atmosphere. "Brother Yunfei, look at this." Before he could finish, Chu Yunfei interrupted him sternly. "Yang Sa, did you really not see anything yesterday?" "I didn't see anything." Yang Sa clutched her head, feeling like she was about to crumble. I really can't remember anything." Chu Yunfei pondered for a moment as if deep in thought. After a while, he stood up and said, "Come sit here." His commanding tone was very much in line with his character. Though domineering, it lacked the arrogance he usually displayed. Yen Sa surprisingly didn't feel any resentment and obediently sat down on the swivel chair. "Relax your whole body." Chu Yunfei's tone softened as he pulled a beautifully crafted golden pocket watch from his jacket pocket, dangling it in front of Yang Sa and gently swaying it. "Look at it. It will take you back to last night and help you remember everything." Yen Sa felt her vision blur, as if she were engulfed in a thick fog, the surroundings turning snow white, as if she were in a primordial state. Suddenly, the fog receded like a tide, and the world began to glow with a yellow hue. She found herself standing on the stairs of Qinyuan Building, the air thick with an eerie and terrifying smell. She descended the stairs until she reached the entrance of the first-floor hallway, where a white figure came into view. It was a woman with curly hair and an attractive figure, resembling a ghost in the dark of night. Hearing the footsteps, the woman slowly turned her head, her eyes glowing with a seductive red light. That face, Yang Sa recognized it instantly. "Chu Man," she screamed, jumping up from the swivel chair. "I remember. Last night I followed Chu Man downstairs and saw the bodies of those boys lying at her feet." Chu Yunfei and Lei Hao exchanged glances, momentarily believing her words. What happened next? Then, Yang Sa recalled, I called her name, and she came over to look at me. Her eyes were red, a bright blood-red color. When I looked into her eyes, my mind went blank, and after that, I don't remember anything. Red pupils! Chu Yunfei furrowed his brow, lost in thought. Yang Sa looked at his sharp features, his slender eyes, prominent nose, and focused expression, all dressed in a white shirt that hinted at his muscular build. She found him unexpectedly charming. When Yang Sa realized her thoughts, her face flushed a deep red like a tomato. What was she thinking? This man was arrogant and petty. How could she think like that? How could she even have such thoughts? Yang Sa, Chu Yunfei said, his expression serious. What kind of person is Lu Chu Man? I just met her. How would I know? Yang Sa quickly lowered her head to hide her flushed cheeks. That's true. Lei Hao, find out the details about Lu Chu Man and why she went into Qinyuan Building. Yang Sa was startled and said, Didn't she say something you didn't want to hear, which is why she was sent there? What did she say that I wouldn't want to hear? Chu Yunfei asked in surprise. Yang Sa inhaled sharply. What lies had Lu Chu Man told? By the time they exited the student council office, it was already 3 in the afternoon. The sun was getting more intense, and the heat rising from the ground made it suffocating, as if the whole world had been thrown into a steamer, ready to turn everyone into buns. It seemed that Chu Yunfei had a moment of conscience, wanting her to move out of Qinyuan building and promising to arrange a better dormitory for her. But Yang Sa didn't want to leave that building. Things weren't resolved yet, and she couldn't just abandon it, especially not her new friend. Sighing, she strolled along the lakeside. Surrounded by tree shade, it wasn't too hot, but her heart was in turmoil, tangled up like a ball of yarn. Was Chu-Man really connected to that monster? It seemed like the creature was targeting her. What was Chu-Man's intention? If she wanted to take her life, she could have killed her last night. Why had she used hypnosis instead? A cool breeze swept across the lake, causing the lotus leaves to sway like green waves. Yan Sa lifted her head, enjoying the rare coolness of the summer day. Just as she did, a caterpillar dropped from a tree, landing squarely on her nose. She jumped in surprise, squealing, and flung the creature to the ground, stomping on it several times. "Damn bug!" Yang Sa cursed, but then she felt a shiver run down her spine. What kind of bug had crawled out from Chu-Man's bed? She had only seen its head, sharp teeth, and dark body, with black fuzz around its neck. What kind of creature was that? What kind of bug looked like that in Qinyuan building? Wait, Yang Sa's eyes lit up. Bugs? Yes, bugs. It was late summer, and Qinyuan building was damp, so why hadn't she seen a single bug? Not even a mosquito or a fly, let alone a cockroach, which was supposedly indestructible. What was going on? Could it be that creature fed on insects? At that moment, Yang Sa spotted a familiar figure. On the other side of the lake, a woman in white floated like a fairy, walking along the riverbank toward the east. Yang Sa recognized that it was the path leading out of the school. Chu-Man? Where could she be going on such a hot day? Without a moment to think, Yang Sa hurried after her. Perhaps all the answers lay with Chu-Man. Yang Sa had to admit that Chu-Man was indeed a rare beauty, with an exceptionally good figure. As she walked, she swayed gracefully, becoming the focal point of attention wherever she went. It was hard to believe that such a beautiful woman could be connected to such an ugly insect. She suddenly remembered what her grandmother had told her long ago. A woman's beauty is a kind of poison, a deadly poison that harms both others and herself. Therefore, mediocrity is a blessing. Due to the heat, there were very few people on the street, and even cars moved sluggishly on the nearly melted asphalt. Yang Sa was sweating profusely, and she had no idea how many streets she had followed Chu-Man down until she finally entered a deep alley, where Chu-Man vanished in the blink of an eye. Panicking, Yang Sa rushed after her. Just as she entered the alley, a group of thugs in bizarre clothing with brightly dyed hair surrounded her, their faces painted with malicious smiles. Yang Sa gasped and quickly stepped back, only to find several more thugs closing in behind her. She took a sharp breath, pressing her back against the moss-covered wall, trembling as she said, "W, what do you want?" "Nothing much. We just haven't had some fun in a while and want to play with you," one bald thug said with a sinister grin. "Little sister, you'd better be good. It wouldn't be nice to hurt this delicate skin of yours." Yang Sa swallowed hard, pressing against the wall as she watched the man smile. She felt goosebumps erupt all over her body, each one falling like a raindrop. Don't touch me." Yang Sa dodged the bald thug's reaching hand, turning to escape, but the thugs grabbed her from all sides, pushing her against the wall. "Don't touch you? Ha ha. What else would we be here for? You'd better behave. We'll be very gentle." With that, they all laughed lecherously, sending chills down Yang Sa's spine. "Stop!" A low shout rang out like thunder, causing everyone to freeze. Yang Sa looked up, stunned to see Chu Yunfei in a white shirt, the third button undone, hinting at his solid chest muscles. In that moment, Yang Sa thought she might have seen wrong. The aura he exuded resembled that of a king leading his army into battle, his formidable presence captivating everyone. "Who the hell are you?" the bald thug shouted, swinging his steel pipe at Chu Yunfei. "Do you dare meddle in my business?" Chu Yunfei chuckled coldly, disdain evident on his face. "What a cliché. Even speaking one word to someone like you would be an insult to my intelligence. Still so arrogant and self-righteous." Yang Sa was pulled back to reality in an instant. Chu Yunfei was indeed Chu Yunfei, always so dismissive of others. "Damn it," the bald thug roared, raising the steel pipe to swing at him. "Get him." Chu Yunfei remained unfazed, a sneer on his lips, filled with contempt. He sidestepped the blow, which narrowly missed his chest, then raised his elbow sharply into the thug's nose, a loud crack echoing as blood gushed from the thug's mouth and nose. The other thugs, seeing their leader take a hit, rushed forward, wielding pipes and sticks from all directions to strike Chu Yunfei. A glint of cold light flashed in Chu Yunfei's eyes as he lifted his foot, delivering a powerful kick to the chest of the nearest thug, who immediately collapsed, coughing up blood. He quickly spun around, delivering a solid back kick to another thug's stomach, sending him flying backward and causing the steel pipe to slip from his grip. Yang Sa watched in awe as Chu Yunfei fought against the thugs, each move fluid and graceful, displaying the skill of someone who had trained for over a decade. Was he really the same spoiled rich kid she remembered? "What are you waiting for?" Chu Yunfei shouted at her. "Why aren't you running?" Yang Sa snapped back to reality at his command. Without thinking, she turned and ran. Although she didn't want Chu Yunfei to get hurt because of her, she absolutely wouldn't be like the cliché heroines in third-rate soap operas, crying and begging to leave together. That would only cause trouble for others and annoy the audience. However, she quickly regretted her reckless decision to run forward. Before this, she had never considered that even fleeing required skill. Otherwise, she would end up like the others. Outside the alley was the main street, and just as she reached the center of the road, she heard a piercing screech of brakes, sharp enough to feel like it pierced her eardrum. What followed was a dizzying swirl of colors and a flood of red. In her last moments of consciousness, she saw Chu Yunfei running toward her in a panic through the sea of crimson. "Azza, she's injured. Aren't you going to check on her?" A young woman lifted a bamboo curtain made of xiangfei bamboo, leaning against the door frame and quietly observing the scene outside the alley. She wore a Ming Dynasty-style robe with a pink face embroidered with intricate, classical patterns. Her elegant hair was styled up, held in place by a translucent jade hairpin that looked like crystal. In her hand, she held a fan embroidered with lotus flowers, with a delicate dragonfly perched on it, reminiscent of the ancient poem, "The young lotus has just revealed its tip, and already there's a dragonfly standing on top." "She'll be fine." Lu Chuman sat inside, savoring a cup of new Da Hong Pao tea in a purple clay cup, her expression calm and composed. Besides, if a hero is rescuing a damsel in distress, wouldn't me going out ruin their moment? The woman in the hanfu smiled lightly, gently swaying her fan as she walked into the room. It looked like an antique shop, decorated in a rustic style, with cabinets made of high-quality cherry wood. Incense burned on the table, evoking ancient memories like drifting mist. Chu Man, I hope you haven't forgotten the reason you entered Ninghua Academy. Don't worry, I won't forget. Lu Chuman's gaze suddenly turned cold as she said, I hope you won't forget the promise you made to me. The woman smiled meaningfully. Your dormitory seems to be hiding some talents. I won't let her interfere with your plans. Chu Man raised her teacup and drank the remaining tea in one gulp. Yen Sa opened her eyes to find herself lying in a white room. Hadn't she just been in a car accident? Was this a hospital? She got out of bed and opened the door, finding an empty, long hallway that felt eerily silent. The ceiling had built-in fluorescent lights, giving the corridor a modern feel. She wandered aimlessly down the hallway, uncertain of where she was going. After walking for what felt like an eternity, she reached a junction with two sets of stairs, one going up and the other going down. A small boy sat on the stairs leading up, his head bowed, wearing a light blue and white hospital gown. It seemed this was indeed a hospital, but why hadn't she seen a single doctor? Hey, little brother, Yang Sa approached, bending down to ask, What are you doing here? Which ward are you in? The boy slowly lifted his head, his face as pale as paper, with eyes that were mostly black and very little white, reminding Yang Sa of the character Juanxiong from the Japanese horror film Ju-on. Come here, little brother. I'll take you back to your ward. Yang Sa reached out her hand, but to her surprise, the boy jumped up and ran up the stairs, stopping a few steps later to turn back, his voice hoarse and aged, saying, You can't come near me. The light on you will scare my soul away. Light. Yang Sa looked down at herself in confusion. What light? She raised her head, wanting to explain, but the boy had already disappeared. She scratched her head, wondering why she hadn't heard his footsteps. Azza, a pleasant female voice called from behind her. Yen Sa turned around to see a figure in white. Chu Man, she exclaimed. What are you doing here? I came to take you back. Chu Man extended her hand to her. Come, let's go back. Yen Sa stared at the delicate, beautiful hand, unsure whether to trust her. But Chu Man had been smiling the entire time, and that smile warmed Yang Sa's heart. Finally, she took her hand, walking back with her. For some reason, the long corridors seemed to fill with people, as if they had appeared out of thin air. Doctors and nurses in white coats, patients being assisted by others, and various citizens moved back and forth in the hallway. But these people seemed not to see them, even passing right through their bodies. She didn't know how long they walked, but they finally returned to the original ward. Yang Sa saw Chu Yunfei, Lei Hao, and the other two roommates sitting on blue chairs in the corridor, their faces etched with deep concern. Chu Man pushed open the door to the ward. Yen Sa was astonished to see herself lying on the hospital bed. What's happening? Just go back. Chu Man smiled slightly and pushed her toward the bed. Don't worry, everyone. Yen Sa felt the world spin around her as she struggled to open her eyes, a sharp pain hitting her forehead. She couldn't help but groan, and this low sound startled a few people outside, who jumped in like rabbits, rushing into the ward, excitedly shouting, Doctor! Doctor! She's awake. Immediately, a doctor rushed in with several nurses, using various instruments to examine her, their faces filled with disbelief. A miracle, truly a miracle. She suffered such severe brain trauma and is awake. It's a miracle. Is she okay then? Liu asked happily. Yes, but we still need to perform a thorough check. Due to the brain injury, it might affect her ability to speak. I'm so tired. Yen Sa felt drowsy as the doctor was too loud. The doctor exaggeratedly opened his mouth wide, staring at her in disbelief. Miracles happen every year, but today it seemed particularly abundant. Yen Sa's recovery ability was astonishing for the doctor, who faced a stern test of his long-standing work experience and medical knowledge every day. Each morning during routine checks, he would reflexively open his mouth in surprise, and even when he returned to his office, it would take him a long time to close it. Since Young Sa woke up, Xu Yunfei had not come to see her again, but every day, Lei Hao would bring some fruit and a bouquet of lilies, saying nothing, just wearing a strange smile that sent shivers down Yang Sa's spine.